Hey, so my name's Ben, and I know the agenda was a little bit off, but I'm not doing a pure design talk. I'm actually talking about ethics in AI. So yeah, like I said, my name's Ben, and we're going to be looking at utility and sanctity and designing an ethically acceptable AI. Let's jump right into it with an example. Now, if you know anything about this topic, you've probably seen the TED-Ed video that this was taken from. And I've shamelessly taken it from that TED-Ed video because it's a really good video that gives a real-world example that isn't completely ridiculous like people tied down to train tracks. But I will talk about people tied down to train tracks. So pretend this is us driving down a road, and this is our car. We're driving this car. And to the left is a motorcyclist with a helmet. To the right is a motorcyclist without the helmet. And in front of us is a truck with some cargo. Not so secure. It's about to fall off. That green blob is some boxes kind of toppling towards us. And the problem with this scenario is it could kill us if we don't do anything. So if we're driving this car, we're going to have a reaction. We might swerve left or right. We're not going to have a thought about which way to go. It'll just happen. It'll be intuitive. But if an AI was driving this car, it's going to have to make a decision. It's going to have to weigh up the options, and it's going to have to decide which way to go. So let's look at those options. If we swerve to the left, we can hit the person with the helmet. Seems pretty safe, right? They're likely to survive. If we swerve to the right, we'll hit the person without the helmet, and they'll probably be injured or die. Or we can do nothing and be hit by the cargo, potentially dying ourselves. At first, the best option seems like to go to the left and hit the person with a helmet. But now we're punishing that person for wearing a helmet. Does that mean I'm safer not wearing a helmet because AI won't target me on the road? So we can't hit that person, can we? Because we're going to end up in a lawless society where no one wears helmets. We can't hit the person on the right either because we're not the police. Yes, wearing no helmet is illegal, but we don't get to decide that we have to punish them because they're not wearing a helmet. The only option left is to go straight ahead and maybe die, but we can't do that, can we? Let's take a look. Just a bit about me. I'm Ben, obviously. I'm a graduate developer at Redify. There's my Twitter handle. Just a quick shout out to all the sponsors for DDD for giving me this opportunity today. I really appreciate it. This is my first conference talk ever, so woo! So these are the basics. These are the things you've got to understand. So utility on the left there is about the societal benefit that someone has from being kept alive and their potential to do good and impact on the world. For example, cure cancer, donate blood, maybe save other lives in some other way. And a good example of this is a child. Someone who hasn't fully realized their potential yet. They haven't grown. They haven't experienced everything that human life has to offer, such as following their opportunities and passions. And on the right, kind of opposite that, but still intertwined, is sanctity, which looks at saving the most people you can by any means possible without directly impacting on someone else's life and inhibiting their freedom. Not taking no direct action to hurt someone else, and valuing human life above every other option you can have. And they seem pretty opposite, but they are actually intertwined, and I'll show you why on the next slide. You've probably seen this problem before, or at least some memes about it. This is the trolley problem, or in Melbourne we call it a tram. And if you haven't seen the tram problem before, I'm going to explain it for you now. There's a tram heading down these tracks. Straight ahead, there's 5 people on the tracks. Maybe they're not tied down, maybe they're just hanging out. Here they're tied down. On the opposite track is 1 person. Maybe they're tied down, maybe they're just a worker going about their job, repairing some tracks where the tram isn't meant to be going. But this tram's brakes have failed, and it's going towards these people. And they can't react fast enough to move out the way, and if they're tied down, they can't move at all. But we are in the unfortunate or fortunate position, whichever way you look at it, to change the tracks. We can flick the switch and save 5 people and kill 1 person, or we can do nothing at all. What would you guys do? It's a hard choice, right? But if you think you'd save 5 people, I want to find out what would make you change your mind. Would you change your mind if it was 1 child on the other tracks? Would you deliberately kill 1 child to save 5 adults? What if it was still just a worker on the tracks and there was 5 children? For me, that's pretty much a no-brainer. I think I'd say 5 children. But it might be different for all of you. And what if it happened for real? We might think that we're going to act a certain way right now, but when we're under that time pressure, we have half a second or less, we're just going to act, right? Who thought about their role in that decision? Who thought, if I act and switch the tracks, I'm now more at fault for that person's death than if I didn't act and let 5 people die? Good job. Good job. Because society would look at that and say, well, yes, you saved 5 people, but you took a deliberate action that hurt someone else in the process who otherwise wouldn't have died if you were there. The 5 people would have died as well, but that was out of your control to begin with. We had a reaction. Right now, we have the freedom to make a decision in this room. We can think about all the options and weigh up all the counter options and decide on what we can do. But reactions don't allow us to have this freedom. They're instinct-based, and they happen in a short amount of time. They're decisions that are made without thinking. And the thing that affects our reaction is unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is... I'm really stuck here. Unconscious bias forces us to act in ways that satisfy our beliefs that we may not know we even have. So let's dig a little deeper into unconscious bias and how it affects us. 2 slides at once. So, explicit bias, conscious bias, is outwards known and practiced. It can be something as simple as your favourite sports team, your favourite flavour of ice cream, your favourite genre of music. Maybe you don't like someone else on the radio. Unconscious bias, though, is learned, deeply ingrained, automatic, and unintentional. It's taught to us through our experiences, and we don't even know we have it. It impulses us to act in ways that satisfy those beliefs, like I said, and causes an emotional reaction in us. So we can do our best to avoid unconscious bias by being aware of it and trying to improve on it when we see it and when we see ourselves leaning towards some form of bias. But how do we know that everyone else in that situation is doing the right thing? If we're designing an AI, we can do our best to remove the bias from it. But without regulation, we don't know if everyone else who's designing AIs are also doing their best to remove bias. We also can't make a perfectly... Oh, almost dropped that there. Unbiased AI. Because we can do our best, but there's always going to be a bit we're not aware of. We can't be 100% self-aware at all times. The other problem with unconscious bias in AI is when it's in the system and defined in the code and deciding how an AI behaves, is it still unconscious? It's now a conscious decision that determines how that AI will act. So our reactions are kind of excusable because they're instinctual. But an AI's isn't really, because it's predefined. And as designers and developers and creators of AI, whose fault is it when that AI doesn't behave? Is it ours? Or is it the AI's for getting itself in that situation? Society will also shape the behaviour of the AI. In Australia, it's really easy to create an AI because we're locked to Australia. Our car can't leave Australia. Maybe it can go to New Zealand on a boat. But the values between those two societies are pretty similar. In Europe, for example, you can drive your self-driving car between countries within hours, where the values might be different, and society might solve the trolley problem in a different way. One society might say, save the 5. The other society might say, save the 1. And suddenly our AI has to adapt. And the driver of that car might have different values to the country that the car's driving in, and suddenly you're impacting on that driver's free will to not kill the people that it doesn't want to kill. So can we fix this situation? Maybe? One of the most commonly proposed solutions is to not do anything. Because when there's no decision, there's no liabilities. So for us as developers, designers, and creators, it means nothing can really come back to us because we didn't choose to do anything in the first place. The problem with that is that if my car's heading towards a wall, I don't want it to just keep heading towards a wall. I'd rather not die. That impacts on my freedom as a driver to drive on the road and not die. But also, we don't want it to kill other pedestrians. So what if we do nothing but protect the driver and the occupants? Well, the German Ethics Commission has created a report on this. And it's probably the closest solution so far in terms of the best solution. So it's a bit of a mouthful, and I'm going to do the direct quote from one of their 15 rules about this. And it's from their report on the ethical rules for automated and connected vehicular traffic. And I can provide a link to this to anyone who wants it afterwards. But they're not the greatest rules yet. And there's a hint in the name as to why. And I'll talk about that a bit after. But here's the quote I want to say. And is Raph in the room? He made a joke, and I was going to make the same joke, so I'm going to make the same joke anyway. This is a mouthful to say. So genuine dilemma situations, like the trolley problem, like the example at the start, cannot clearly be standardized, nor can they be programmed in such a way that the response is ethically unquestionable. Technological systems must be designed to avoid accidents. However, they cannot be standardized to a complex or intuitive assessment of the impacts of an accident in such a way that they can replace or anticipate the decision of a responsible driver with the moral capacity to make correct judgments. That is the actual grammar in that sentence, by the way. If that was too hard to understand, here's the summation. Avoid accidents at all costs, otherwise do nothing. Don't prepare your AI for a dilemma, which seems pretty counterintuitive because we just talked about what to do in those situations. Actually still do two things, they say. Number one, the vehicle must do its best to avoid the injury or death of people while preserving the free will of occupants. Like I said, I have the right to drive on the road without being killed by my own car, and so do other people. And two, the vehicle must prioritize human life over damage to other animals and property. Now, I think that's a no-brainer because I like being alive, but I did this speech yesterday in the office, and our office coordinator said that if there was a dog in front of her car, she'd rather die. So we're going to go back to this example and see if we can apply the rule set. We said we're going to avoid an accident. We said we're going to value human life above everything else, and we're not going to impact on my free will as a driver. To the left, there's a person. We can't hit them. We don't want to hurt a person. To the right, there's also a person. We can't hit them. We don't want to hurt a person. Ahead, well, that's property, and we said we're going to go for property. But then, if that kills me, that impacts my free will. So again, we're stuck. Now, the hint in the name was that it was a report for connected vehicular traffic. That assumes that the cars on the road are all autonomous or connected in some way. They can communicate with each other, and in this perfect connected world, for example, if we swerved left, the bike on the left would have moved ahead. And the car behind it would have slowed down because my car would have said, I need to move out the way now. And our car would safely weave in between that car and the bike. And the same thing would happen for every car behind mine. The cars on either of those lanes would split apart, and the middle lane would spread into the outer two lanes. But we don't live in that society yet. The problem with that is that between when autonomous vehicles begin to be introduced, as they are now, and when they're in a period of widespread adoption, we're in this situation where these situations will arise not every day, because that's kind of unrealistic, but fairly often. And often enough for us to have to do something about it. So at the end of the day, it's up to us as the designers and developers and creators of these AI to think about these situations when we're creating our systems, making sure we're doing the best thing we can. We have to consider these, because no one wants to hear that their loved one died because they were an edge case and they weren't considered. Thank you.